to my channel. My name is Casey and this is my son, Drew Vaughn. And today we are going to talk about Atlantis, timeline, parallel timelines, and psychic bleed-throughs. And Drew is going to share a little bit of information that he knows about Atlantis. So Drew, why don't you tell us what Atlantis was?
So Atlantis was actually a real city that was like a very long time ago. But it was actually kind of near the water, and big waves splashed it. Then a very big wave came and sunk down Atlantis.
A deluge. They called it the flood. The flood or the deluge, right?
Yeah. And
what happened to the people?
And
What happened to them?
they drowned.
They drowned. So that's the myth.
And
Is it a myth or is it true?
And also Pluto drowned, which was the owner of Atlantis.
So he said that the owner of Atlantis was named Pluto, and he was what, the king?
Yeah, he technically had a trident.
He had a what?
Trident.
A trident. What's a trident look like?
So it's like a big it's like a big.
Are you sure it wasn't Neptune and not Pluto?
Neptune.
I think it was Neptune.
It's King Neptune.
King Neptune.
King Neptune and Pluto.
Right. So I think it was based off of Neptune, the story about Neptune, which
Yeah.
is a planet, right?
Yeah.
So thank you, buddy. That was awesome. So Atlantis is a myth, and it's considered a fable. However, if anyone has had any kind of psychic bleed-throughs with Atlantis, or has, as I do, connections to Atlantis timeline while I'm still in this lifetime, then you would understand that while it's a little confusing, and I don't quite know why I'm able to tap into that timeline and this timeline too. I believe it's because what we thought about about time being linear actually is not true. Actually, in my opinion, time is not linear. I believe it's actually more circular. And what I think is actually happening, what it kind of feels like for me when I have psychic bleed through, it kind of feels like I'm in two places at one time sometimes, or I'm in two different timelines. And I think a lot of people who identify as like a twin have this thing where they're like actually they feel like they're living like a parallel life, or it's like in their dreams or whatever, in their sleep, they're doing something else instead of that's completely different than what they're doing in their waking life. And that's kind of what I experience. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about like some of the research I've done on Atlantis and how I feel that it is really and truly, Atlantis is very much coming to the forefront of everybody's memories in order to transmute some of these previous timelines, number one, and also some of the trauma that came from memories of Atlantis. So I have memories of Atlantis. I have trauma from Atlantis, and as a starseed, which is what I am, I have gone before my my star family and have been kind of reminded of what I'm supposed to be doing here. I have what's called an indigo soul contract. And the indigo soul contract is a contract which I don't know exactly, like I've only been able to figure out a little bit of it from reading online about some of the other people that have shared it, but essentially when I came into some realizations as I got a little bit older, and even when I was a little girl, I kind of understood I had this, I had something I was supposed to do. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I knew that I knew I had to find someone, and I knew that I had to do something for them. So I had this rough idea, or like a rough memory of finding a person, and I knew they were a male, and then doing something for them, and I didn't know what it was. And so I wanted to talk about Atlantis and how this kind of plays into our present day life. And so the parallel lives are of Atlantis, timelines of Atlantis. What that means for I think a lot of the people that consider themselves twins or twin flames or twin souls, is that we actually have the ability to tap into a higher dimension. And this is a dimension that we are always in, even when we're awake. We're still in another timeline. So we have this timeline that we're working in, and we have star family and soul family that we're also speaking to in fifth dimension, sixth dimension, seventh dimension. So we're able to make contact with a few different people, or we're able to make contact with our soul family, like our parents and our spirit family. And so I wanted to share a little bit about like the things I've learned from being contacted by the higher dimensions, and being contacted by them has really changed my life, and it reaffirmed or like made me remember and jogged my memory of why I was here. So accessing the Akashic field, it's pretty important if you are interested in remembering why you're here or what your soul purpose is. And a lot of us can access the Akash. The Akash is just the astral plane. People refer to it as the abyss, but it's really just one, it seems to be just one place. It's just the astrals. It's also, a lot of people call it the realm of the dead, and they even sometimes call it hell. But it's just the astral plane. Accessing the astral plane will help us to be able to remember things. It can help us remember the future, the past, change timelines. So once you're able to access that, you can work with time a little bit more. So I found this really cool, I guess it's an organization. They're called Watch Under Prayer. And they have a really good article called The Death of the Phoenix. And it talks about Atlantis rising, and Atlantis rising again, and all of the things that are sort of happening now with people accessing the 0 point field, which is the Akash, which is the ethers or the astral plane. It's also called the halls of Mensa. It's the library. It's the library. It's like going to the library and checking out a book. And when you go to the library, it's really important to have some respect, because there's a lot of people that go into the library and they read timelines, but they don't have like the humility to say thank you once the timeline is read, or and it does take a lot of humility and humble pie in order to do this kind of work, to clear out all the gunk from all the past lives. They say that about 70% of all humans have histories or ties to Atlantis, but just don't remember. And I really think that is real. This article that I was reading also speaks on something called the void. It talks about the void, and it talks about the Book of the Dead as being a real a wealth of information about the kinds of things that Atlanteans practiced. A lot of what Atlanteans did was accessing the Akashic field or the astral plane. The reason why I feel like Atlantis had the problems that they had and why they became the fallen, the traitors, the watchers, the ones that betrayed God. A lot of that was due to black magic and energy vampirism. So at one point, Atlantis was a utopian society, and the male and female divine feminine and divine masculine were equals, and they essentially, their energies, from what I've read, actually protected the earth, or protected their colony. And so the energy that the twin flames gave out into the planet and into the frequency that they emitted, the light that they emitted was so strong that when there were however many there were of them, they were actually able to use that frequency as a force field that was called the Seal of Atlantis, or the Atlantean Seal, which actually in this present day is the either the Solomon Seal or the Seal of, or the Star of David. It was the six-pointed star, which is a masculine and feminine, or heaven and earth meet. So, there's so much research on this, and it speaks about how what ended up happening with the masculines. This is not from this particular website, but this is from another one that I read, that actually what happened with the masculine is that the masculines were their DNA was actually reversed. It was reversed, and I believe that it was done by the Nephilims. And so they hybridized the masculine sides of the Atlantis, divine feminine, divine masculine, and they started doing gender splitting. They started splitting the ones that were, a pair, all of a sudden started to fight because of the interference that was coming from these invaders, these aliens, essentially, and they were reptilians. So over the years, what ended up happening was that I believe that either one or both, probably, it sounds like maybe just one of them, probably, I think it was the masculine, actually ended up having a Merkaba that ended up not being able to spin properly. And due to the way that it was hindered, they actually were stuck and couldn't do anything, couldn't evolve beyond what is termed the Phantom Matrix. The Phantom Matrix essentially is something that's still playing out today and is actually coming into play a lot more in our society right now, based off of the reinsertion into our society of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence makes black holes and makes phantom matrices. The Phantom Matrix is a energy sucking system that instead of giving energy, it actually is a vampirism system. And so a lot of what the Indigo Threes are doing is correcting the Merkaba spin to, instead of reversing it, to make it spin correctly, which is masculine is clockwise and feminine is counterclockwise, I believe. Anyway, what the AI does and has been doing is they have been distorting the humans' Merkabas so that they actually have what's called the tail of Satan. The tail of Satan comes from too much. It comes from too much gross matter in the astral body, in the astral body. Instead of being able to harness the Merkaba correctly, it actually spins in the reverse way and it implodes on itself. So I wanted to talk about my research about that and how that is actually related to something called weathermancing, which is the summoning of like hurricanes and tornadoes, and how the Merkaba and the things that go on in the astral plane actually it does affect others. It does affect others, and twin flame unions are like, both parties have a very, very, very serious responsibility, because the things that happen around those unions can cause either chaos or like improvement. So I wanted to address that as a person who has seen it from the astral plane, has felt the energy, and talk about what we could be doing to make things better and clearer and all of that good stuff. So the Atlanteans are supposedly, they are sitting in the Phantom Matrix, and they are considered the fallen. They're considered the Watchers, or the angels that betrayed God. And the reason why they are fallen and have betrayed God is only because of the hybridization that was allowed and because of the reversals. Now, I have had personal experience with coming into contact with an angelic being who presented himself to me as a guide, and I know his name. Whenever I would go onto the computer to look up this being and get some information on him, I would put his name in the computer, and his name is Metatron, and I would put his name in the computer, and every time I would type his name, my computer would actually read something else. So I would type Metatron, and my computer would actually write mutation. And then I was like, after the first couple times of it happening, and I'm thinking it's, like just an odd occurrence. But it happened so much that mutation kept coming up instead of Metatron, that I started to think that this was a message from Spirit. And I thought I would share it with you. So Metatron is actually an energy that runs reversals, Merkaba reversals. And what that means is, instead of the twins coming together as masculine and feminine in the etheric realm as going right, rotating correctly, what Metatron, what that particular word means to me, and what it feels like I'm being told, is that entity is actually running reversals on twin flame unions, where instead of the twins going, or they don't know. I mean, twin flames have never, I mean, they probably have done this a million times in their lives, but they don't know the correct way to rotate. So if twins in union are rotating in the opposite direction of how they're supposed to go, they can actually start to, instead of it being a high level love frequency that is being that's being pushed out into the instead of the energy being like pushed out, there is a way that you can spin the Merkaba where the energy is actually coming into you like a black hole, like imploding. And so the divine feminine from Atlantis remember this as well. So we might actually just be remembering what we did wrong. But according to what I've been reading, the divine feminine in Atlantis times actually they like made a black hole in their body and they imploded. Well, that's what it says anyways. I don't know. It would make sense though. So that's what I was reading, and I thought it would be a good thing to do, to come online and talk about the way that it should go, because if you spin it in a reversal, it's going to create a black hole, or a like, it's going to create the energy is going to start sucking into you in a contraction way instead of expansion. And a lot of what happens with the dynamics between the two polar opposite twins is that on one side you have a contracting energy anyways, which is opposite of the feminine energy, which is love. So one of them is totally contracting and pulling energy into themselves, and the other one is shoving energy out. And the more fear that is, the more fear that the masculine energy emits, actually what happens for the females is they actually are attracted, because what's happening is the fear is contracting and pulling in, and it's pulling energy. You're like, when you're afraid, you're actually pulling energy into you. And so the feminine, as long as the masculine is fearful, the feminine is chasing. And so what you have to do in this situation is you have to like line them up so that they're like actually in harmony and walking in the same direction. Otherwise, if they're walking in two separate directions or running from each other, it's almost like things start to implode. And actually at that point, in the astral plane, you can actually start pulling energy into you instead of it being an expansion, which is what it actually is supposed to be for both. So that's kind of where I feel like a lot of this merging stuff does happen in the astral plane, is just because of all of that negative energy on that side, and then all of the positive energy on the other side. It just makes like kind of like a deficit. So I thought I would share that, and I thought I would share that the reason why it looks like Atlantis did have so many problems with black magic and portals and things of that nature is actually because once the male developed those different genetics, and I think it actually changed their disposition as well. It made them more fearful, which is very much a reptilian brain thing. And I think that once the reptilian brain began, or when they started to adopt more of the reptilian characteristics, it really became polarized between the two of them, and it probably became polarized to the extent that it actually reversed the way that their Merkabas actually should be spinning. So I wanted to talk about that because that's a very important thing to take note of. Also, it talks about I wanted to read this one thing here. I can't remember where I found it, but it speaks about the people, the humans that are in this timeline of third dimension that can tap into Atlantis, the Atlantean timelines. Some of us actually have been contacted by Atlantis timeline players, and they're us. They're saying, I mean, essentially from what I gather is that they're us. But the Nephilim actually are, they're actually, I believe, we all have reptilian DNA inside of us. That's for sure. But I am pretty sure that with the Indigo 3 soul contracts, I'm pretty sure it has something to do with correcting a Merkaba spin issue. And I don't know all of it, but I have this, I have been reminded that is actually what I'm supposed to be here doing, is actually it's polar integration. It's actually integration. It's polar integration, where I am literally removing the polarized forces of fear to bring it into a balance of love. The Merkaba cannot run on fear. The Merkaba runs on love. It has to run on love energy. That is what makes the Merkaba work, is love energy. It does not run on fear. And so that is another part of it. You know, some of us don't really, we know, we have some idea of what we're doing, or some idea of remembering what we're here for. But a lot of us have just innate soul memory of this is the person I'm supposed to find, and this is the thing I'm supposed to do for him. So I wanted to talk about that, talk about psychic bleed-throughs, talk about memories of drowning. Those are scary memories. And talk about, you know, what it is I think we're doing now that could possibly bring us right back into that phantom matrix where we were, where we came from. And I'm going to talk more about the phantom matrix. It's that is a very, very important thing to talk about. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back. Bye.